Hello and welcome to brand new Lost Ark video. Continuing the series, today we have an unbiased PVE Class Tier List. This will not be your regular PVE Class Tier List, as I will be ranking the 15 classes that are coming on Western release based on how they perform and how welcome / needed / wanted they are in a highest tier 3 endgame PVE content, which is Legion raids. The reason for that is very simple. All the DPS classes are good in general, normal endgame PvE content such as Guardian raids and Abyss dungeons, and you will never have a problem clearing these or finding a group. But the small differences between these classes come from their performance in Legion raids. With most of the classes I have cleared at least first Legion raid Commander Walton in a normal and hard mode, so this will be my personal unbiased tier list based off of my experience with these classes. First, I will start off with two support classes, Bard and Paladin. I am putting both of these classes in S tier for one main reason. Both of these classes are needed in every Legion raid group. You will never see a raid that only has 1 or 0 supports. Every single raid leader will always look to fill and save 2 slots for 2 supports, and that alone makes them very valuable. It also goes without saying that the kind of utility they provide during the raid pretty much cements them in S tier until 3rd support class is released. Since Bard and Paladin are the only 2 classes that is needed in every single Legion raid group, they will be the only 2 S tier classes, and since you can fill raid group with whatever other classes you prefer, the DPS classes will be ranked in A, B and C tier. And I want you to keep in mind again that the difference between A, B and C tier is small, and since I can't put them all in A tier, I will use these small differences to rank them. Going in an alphabetical order, we are starting off with Artillerist. Out of all Gunner advanced classes, Artillerist is the most tanky and has the highest DPS output, but at the cost of the mobility. When it comes to utility, it has a self-shield that makes him immune to damage, combined with a lot of super armors and high destruction and impairment. It is not that hard to play, but it is difficult to master, and since bosses in Legion raids move a lot and turn around, you need to know mechanics and attack the boss to properly position yourself to deal damage in the small intervals that you will have, and with the lack of mobility, not even relying on your super armors and self-immune shield will always help you. It is a desirable class to have in a raid group, and you won't have any problems finding raid groups. I am putting Artillerist in A tier. Moving on to Berserker. The class has always been at the top of PvE charts and tier lists, and with the recently reworked class engraving, the Madness build permanently gives Berserker pretty much everything at the cost of the HP being at 20%. With increased movement speed, attack speed and 65% damage reduction, combined with already high damage, high destruction and impairment, with couple super armors, it makes Berserker a very desirable class in Legion raids, especially in equalized PvE content. It's a fairly easy class to play, and at times you will feel invincible, but becomes slightly difficult to master as mechanics play a much bigger part than just pure DPS. Berserker goes into A tier. Next up is DEATHBLADE. It's a class that doesn't excel in dishing out high burst damage, but it's more oriented on sustained damage over longer periods of time due to fairly low cooldowns. The main problem with the class is that most high-hitting abilities are back attacks, so you need to take advantage of constantly being behind the boss, and as you already know, the bosses in Legion raids move a lot and turn around, so it becomes increasingly difficult to keep up with the small time frames that boss gives you to DPS while being in a good position to attack from the back. The high mobility and attack speed complements that playstyle, but in most situations you will find yourself struggling to do any relevant damage. Utility-wise, DEATHBLADE provides a 10-second 12% damage increase for all party members with back attacks, which again most classes won't be able to benefit from due to constant repositioning. DEADBLADE isn't too hard to play, but the mobility playstyle could be hard to master. If you plan to main DEADBLADE, I recommend you fully stick with it and upgrade it to the max, as it does not serve as a good alt character and you might struggle to even find raid groups. So with all of that, I'm putting DEADBLADE into B tier. DEADEYE in the eyes of most people is a downgraded version of a gunslinger that uses shotgun as a main damage weapon, which makes the class practically melee. It is a very squishy class that has low burst damage but a very high sustain damage. Being squishy and in constant melee range goes well with the high mobility. Utility wise, it provides a decent destruction and impairment. The main problem is that the class is very difficult to play and master, so a lot of people choose the meme pistol only build, which does significantly less damage than the shotgun build only because it's easier to play. Expect to have a very hard time finding raid groups with the meme pistol build. Overall, it's the same situation like with the DEADBLADE, where if you will main DEADEYE, you better become mechanically the best DEADEYE player in the world and gear it up to the max, as the class is not worth having as an alt character due to it being hard to play and you not spending nearly enough time playing it every day to master it. So with that, DEADEYE goes into C tier. Gunslinger in the eyes of public is an upgraded version of DEADEYE that focuses on sniper skills. While there is a case to be made that fully geared tier 3 DEADEYE without a DPS Gunslinger, it does not matter, as Gunslinger is much safer and easier class to play compared to DEADEYE. It's a very squishy class with loads of mobility, and focusing on sniper skills means she can dish out damage from safe distance compared to melee range shotgun DEADEYE. It is easier class to play but still very difficult to master compared to DEADEYE, and due to that reason it is more popular and you should not have much trouble getting into raid groups. So with that reason alone, I'm putting Gunslinger in B tier. GUNLANCER is a class that most people mistake for a tank, which in reality is true. It has the highest tankiness out of all the classes, but it also has the most consistent burst damage outputs. Utility wise, it provides very high destruction and impairment, while also giving party-wide buffs, debuffs and shielding. The only downside is a very low mobility, but you don't really need mobility as you literally sit there and tank everything while focusing on head attacks due to most skills having increased head attack damage. It's a very desirable class that is easy to play and not too hard to master, so you should have no issues finding raid groups as a main GUNLANCER or even as an alt character. GUNLANCER goes into A tier. Scrapper is another well-rounded class that has high tankiness with both burst and sustain damage being high and consistent depending on the build. It is a melee class with high mobility that also provides a very high amount of destruction and impairment. The downside is inconsistency in attacking the boss in the back. You have to be glued to the boss from the behind, and as mentioned before in a video, Legion raid bosses move a lot and turn around, and having to manage your cooldowns so you can dish out consistent damage while constantly repositioning can fall off in the long run and become annoying. Due to amount of mobility and repositioning, it's similar to DEADBLADE in terms of how difficult it is to play and master. Regardless of that, it should not be a problem for you to find raid groups, and Scrapper also serves as a good alt character. I am putting Scrapper in B tier. Shadowhunter is one of the easiest classes to play and master even in Legion raids. They don't require much to shine and dish out damage, which is focused more on sustained damage due to cooldowns, has a great mobility while being able to take hits. It is a class that you simply cannot go wrong with. As long as you know wipe mechanics in Legion raids, you can fully mash your keys and spam skills without any order and not worry on positioning too much. Small downside is that it has fairly low destruction and impairment, but that should not be an issue if you use destruction and impairment bumps to supplement for it. You shouldn't have many issues finding raid groups, and the class also serves as a very good alt due to it being cheap and not requiring much to shine. Shadowhunter goes into B tier. Sharpshooter is a generic bow and arrow class that up until Sorceress release it was the only true long range DPS class. It's a fairly squishy class, but utilizing the range of the skills mean you shouldn't get hit very often, and boss moving around and repositioning shouldn't affect your DPS. Its biggest DPS comes from farming identity gauge. Alongside that, it provides a 6% party-wide damage increase over 8 seconds, literally throughout the whole boss fight if you time it right. All the hard-hitting skills have increased critical strike chance on hit, so with 40 to 50% of critical chance in your stats, you pretty much guarantee most of your skills to always crit. The main struggles are the lack of mobility skills and fairly low destruction and impairment, which you need to supplement with bombs. It's a fairly easy class to play, but becomes increasingly difficult to master, as in some region raids, you might spend most of the time in melee range. Overall, it's a class that won't have any issues in getting into raid groups, as well as it serves as a good ult character due to it not requiring too much to shine. Sharpshooter goes into B tier. Sorceress is a fairly squishy class with high cast times and insane burst damage. You heavily rely on filling up your identity gauge to reduce the cast time, cooldowns and increase skill damage, while also giving you the mobility needed to blink out of harm's way. The high burst damage comes with very high destruction and impairment. Sorcerer begins to shine once you get to Legion raids, as everything you need to make her viable becomes available in tier 3 content. For that sole reason, I would not recommend having Sorceress as an alt character, as it is very expensive and hard to maintain. It is undoubtedly going to be the most popular class in the West, so there will be no issues for you to find raid groups. It is fairly hard to play and pull off combos properly, as you need to know the mechanics and boss attacks to position yourself properly due to cast times, and being squishy class could end up in you taking a lot of damage and missing your combo. Sorceress goes in A tier. When it comes to SOULFIST and Striker, I have very little experience playing them. Both of the classes are very mobile and can dish out high amounts of damage. First, SOULFIST build is more focused on buffing herself and throwing everything you have and your awakening into a boss doing massive amounts of damage. The big downside for that is that you need to know when you can use those, as bosses are very mobile and you could end up completely missing out everything. The second build is where you're already buffed up, but the downside to that is that there is a lot of downtime and waiting for cooldown of your skills, which requires a high skill ceiling, and the class is not very easy to play and master. Striker plays the same way as Scrapper and DEADHBLADE, where he focuses on back attacks, and it can become highly difficult to position yourself to maximize the damage, which in turn would make you feel pretty useless. Both classes have decent destruction and impairment, while not providing much for the party in terms of utility. Overall, there might be some struggles of getting into raid groups with both of these classes, as there are much better classes who can do more for far less. For the sole reason that if you can master SOULFIST, I'm putting it in B tier, but Striker goes to C tier until it receives some buffs, as his female counterpart is much better. WARDANCER is a class that focuses mostly on knowing when to unleash your huge power and when to buff. WARDANCER buffs are the strongest form of buffs in the game out of all the classes, and the difficulty of knowing when to use them separates good WARDANCERs from bad ones. It has a really high sustain damage if you use it at the correct time, while being very mobile and able to dodge boss attacks easy. It has low amounts of destruction and impairment, so always carry bombs. The class is very easy to play and easy to master once you learn the timings, or you can coordinate with your group to unleash it at the perfect time. It is a very desirable class and you will have no issues in getting into raid groups. The class serves really good as an alt character due to the buffs it gives and how easy it is to play, so people are likely to take you in their group even if you barely meet requirements. WARDANCER goes into A tier. Keep in mind that this is my personal unbiased opinion based off of my own experience playing these classes in tier 3 Legion raids. All of the classes apart from support classes are A tier classes in overall endgame from tier 1 to tier 3. There is very little that separates each class, and what makes a good class isn't the class itself, it's the person playing that class. This was an objective opinion on how each class performs, At tier 3 Legion rates, there is very little difference between each tier. A class can be S tier, but in the hands of an inexperienced player that doesn't know mechanics of the boss and the class, it quickly becomes D tier, and at the same time, a C tier class can very easily become A tier if you are doing good with it. At the end of the day, don't focus on what's good and what's bad, what's doing more damage and what's tanky. Focus on what you like and what is more fun to you. If you liked this type of content, please consider liking the video and don't forget to subscribe and turn the notifications on so you don't miss out on the future content. If you have any questions about Lost Ark in general, feel free to leave it in the comments or send it in the chat while I'm live on Twitch. Thank you for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.